Adam Ballinger, and this is a little bit of a response to a few different questions that have come in. So we're going to do a little bit of neck work today, and I want to explain a little bit about the anatomy. I've also seen a couple of really good posts out there from other teachers and instructors who've given some really good clues and cues on getting this long chain of musculature along the back of the neck to be more active, and some great groundwork to do that as well. So I'm going to take this back a step, give a little more explanation, and see if we can start at a real baseline for a lot of folks. And I'll mix in some really cool big terms as well. Now, part of what we're going to be doing is strengthening up some of the muscles of the back and stretching some of the musculature in the front. So here's a little bit of anatomy, and you don't need to memorize all the parts. A lot of the elongation muscles in the back, we have a couple different networks of them that go from the back of the skull or the side of the vertebrae spine and the skull back into about the bottom of the cervical spine, and some of them even go right down in between the scapula. They're not really shoulder muscles, they're pretty unique cervical extensors, or even because some of them attach to the head, they are cervical extensors, but they also extend the skull back as well. Now, in the front of the cervical spine, extremely deep in there, we have some really small muscles, and they're called deep cervical flexors, because they're going to go this direction. When you get the forward head and neck position, if you can see how the chin juts out and forward, those cervical extensors, one of the things that happens to them is they totally change shape as the cervical spine has gone into flexion. So we've got to do a little bit of work where we inhibit those, and then we might even teach them how to be a little bit stronger with some of our more isometric activation while we're in there. This is really, really key. The location of those deep cervical flexors, I might have said extensors a second ago, they're flexors. Part of what they do when our head is in an upright position is it allows us to have integration in the front and the back, which also supports a lot of our rotation work. So, when we're in these poses, the extend from the back of the neck and maybe even start to get that deep upper cervical extension, your chin's probably going to come up. The goal there is to keep the spine up and then draw the chin in. If you did it really intense, it will mess with your voice. Kind of changes the position of your voice box. So if it happens, you know that you're doing it well. All right, let's get to the ground and do a couple of exercises. Okay, so now that we're down on the ground, I want to give you a heads up on a little bit of this. This is great posture work that you can use in Pilates work, on the yoga mat, if you're doing just general posture movement, coaching or training. And we can take some of these movements and put it right into our fitness stuff like kettlebells, CrossFit, and really change the way we're accessing a lot of our core position, our inner core pressure, and then all the way up into that cervical position, which is going to change a lot of how we use our shoulder girdles as well. So at the base of a lot of shoulder issues is spinal posture or thoracic position. Okay, so the first part I want to show you, I'm taking from some of the DNS work that you might have seen me talk about before, or maybe it's been in person that you've seen me bring this up. And we're going to take a position where we're laying more on our belly than anything else, and I'm going to let my feet splay out. A lot of cool explanations about how this works, but I'm going to skip a lot of that today. Okay, so belly down. And I'm going to take these hands and scoot them a little bit farther forward. So if you've done a lot of plank work, usually those hands and elbows are going to be in pretty narrow and a bit tight. So this is already quite a bit different. I want to take those out. Now the explanation on how this works and why we see this in the DNS systems work is that it comes all the way back into some root posture and movement programming that we go through, and we can even think that maybe infants are born with a lot of programming even before they start to explore their human movement development. So infants go through a process where they go through some of these same steps. So if an adult is a little bit out of order in some of these things and the balance between these different movement patterns, then this is a nice way to reprogram some of it. So I'm going to turn the legs out, and then one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to push down enough of the forearms that I begin to support upper thoracic and cervical extension. Now for the DNS work, we want to take this and eventually push from the core so the rib comes in. Now what that does is it usually throws a lot of people into forward head movement. When we activate those upper core muscles, like if we're doing sit-ups and stuff like that, tons of people are just going to express that pattern of the forward head position. So right here, you might start off a little more gentle and just begin to initiate, push from the core, and then begin to go head up, even if the chin lifts. And then the last part is to hold all that while you bring the chin in. Now some folks, clients, or if you're working like with a small group, you might get folks who immediately notice that there's kind of a fatigue and stretch right there at the base of the skull where the occiput is and where that comes in to those upper cervical vertebrae. That's not a bad thing. Those folks are probably using some of those muscles that help lift the head and peel it back. They're probably using those for part of their lift. And when they begin to draw the chin in and activate some of those deep cervical flexors while they're elongated, they're very likely to feel this kind of fatigue because it's more of an active stretch going on right there at the base of the occiput. This is where a lot of headache work comes in, cervicogenital headaches. Oh yeah, right there. Now, I'm going to add that core even more because when I'm up moving around in the day, if we get to a situation where I want to turn on my core, I don't want to just slip back into that pattern as soon as my core wakes up. So I really want to develop that pattern. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do in there, and this is a little bit of my favorite stuff to add in, and it's not quite right out of the dynamic systems work that I was referencing a moment ago, is I'm going to move the leg just a little bit, and I'm going to start setting my body up for a turn. But I'm going to control the shoulders. So if you're used to the DNS work, we take this position and sometimes we start to go up with it through the whole arm and shoulder. We move off that other shoulder through the core. Wonderful stuff. But on this one, I'm going to change the back leg. So I'm getting into a little bit of that crawl position. And I'm just going to take the neck, I'm going to get it into that position, and I'm just going to rotate. Now you don't have to rotate and like set a personal record. What I'm trying to do here is hold the shoulders just totally straight. I'm using a lot of this inner core pressure, core activation to just hold the core. My hips are a little bit off. And that's going to add just a little bit of perturbation, challenge. And then I'm going to try to take that and just rotate. And I'm going to try to rotate mostly at the upper cervical vertebrae first, rather than rotate and turn from the collar or the ribs, the thorax area. So this is a little bit like cars, except for I'm mixing it up with a little bit of other stuff. So a real strong turn, and then I would do the same on the opposite side as well. Okay, and that would basically look like just altering the legs a little bit. Engage. And turn. Now when you get into that turn, part of what we've done with our core shoulder setup and the legs, and being so close to the ground, we have the ability to press down or root down, activate and create kind of like a floating spine, a floating rib cage. So we have the ability to move and do a little bit of lift. But in all that work, we're cinching down so that the shoulders don't really have much room to move, and the hips don't have much room to move either. And then we're activating that deep pattern where we just rotate in the very upper cervical vertebrae first. If you were really, really pushing it and you could hold your stability and you had a lot of mobility mid-cervical spine down to the lower cervical spine, you might be able to turn your head quite a bit. And I like to think about the ear that's coming back. Yeah, the ear that's going back towards the shoulder blades, that's what I'm pulling around. Okay? And I still have long cervical extension, deep cervical flexors engaged as I go to turn. And I'm just going to try to reprogram that. Everything's kind of active and engaged. There's a lot of irradiation, a lot of different muscles working at the same time and contributing to my total force. And then I'm just going to begin to build a little bit of that mobility back into the upper cervical spine where so many people lose it when they start getting into that spinal creep, the vertical spinal creep and the forward head position. All right, this is Adam Ballinger. Not the easiest exercise. If you do it and you have the opportunity to put one of your cell phones or tablets out and put it on a mirror, so a mirror setting or selfie setting so that you can see what you're doing, that would help you out a ton. I really want to see that that entire throat and cervical spine comes back and then it's chin in. So important, and you'll be shocked at how helpful that can be. Now, if you do have pain or anything like that that's beyond the scope of practice of something like this, so you probably should check with your physical therapist or your orthopedist or just your general practitioner if you're experiencing a lot of pain. The cervical spine is quite complex. It's got a lot of little stuff in it, so you can overwork it and overdo it. If you do think that there's an issue at hand that you should have checked out, please go get it checked out before you start working with this. All right, leave me some comments. I'd love to hear what you think, and have fun and be safe.